Picture this. It's 2010. You've just been hired to build a public sector business for Amazon Web Services, and you stroll into Capitol Hill, completely fired up to pitch the revolutionary concept of cloud computing to the US government. But there's a pretty massive problem. There was literally no legal way for the government to buy it. Zero security compliance standards existed for it, and the IT leaders you're pitching to are absolutely terrified of losing their physical servers. So how on earth do you pull that off?
Welcome to this explainer. We are diving into an incredibly fascinating piece of tech history today, one that actually has massive implications for the explosive AI boom we're living through right now. We're tracking the journey of Teresa Carlson, who essentially built the AWS public sector business completely from scratch. Listen, her story isn't just about selling servers. It's an absolute masterclass in creating a market that didn't even legally exist yet.
Okay. Here's our playbook for today. 1. Creating a market from scratch. 2. Customer usage over software sales. 3. Hiring for the mission. 4. Landing the CIA contract. And 5. The cloud and AI parallel. Let's get into it.
Kicking things off with Part 1, Creating a Market from Scratch. To really wrap your head around the scale of what Carlson accomplished, just look at this number, $10 billion. When she started at AWS back in 2010, her team was exactly 2 people, and they had 0 revenue. Over the next 10 years, she grew the global public sector business into a $10 billion juggernaut. But getting there? Well, that required overcoming some incredibly steep, honestly almost comical barriers.
Carlson actually recounts going to Capitol Hill to meet with congressional leaders to advocate for the cloud. And you know what their response was? Are you here to talk about books or taxes? Seriously. They literally had no concept of Amazon beyond the retail bookstore. The folks in charge of the budgets had 0 clue what the cloud was. And the IT directors, the people she playfully called server huggers, were actively fighting against it because they felt like it threatened their entire domain.
So before Carlson could sell a single thing, she had to educate. And I absolutely love how grassroots this was. She hosted literal pizza and cookie evenings. Her team would invite government IT workers into this small conference room in Virginia, hand them a little Amazon card with some credits, and just say, "Bring your computer." Then, they'd show these super skeptical government workers how to spin up a data center in 5 minutes. To those government IT directors, those server huggers, Carlson said it seemed like pure voodoo. They literally couldn't believe their eyes.
But here's the catch. Seeing wasn't enough to actually enable buying. The government didn't have any framework to purchase this voodoo. So Carlson's team had to patiently work with the US government to literally define what cloud computing was through NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They actually helped establish FedRAMP, the very first security and compliance model for the cloud. They had to write the rules of the market before they could even play in it. Keep that in mind, because that lesson becomes incredibly important when we talk about AI a bit later.
Which brings us to Part 2, Customer Usage over Software Sales. See, Carlson had previously run the federal business for Microsoft, and that world was highly transactional. You sell a static software license, you get paid, and you walk away. But this new AWS cloud model required a complete rewiring of her brain. Why? Because customers only paid for what they actively used.
This story brilliantly illustrates the shock of that transition. Carlson remembers looking at an early spreadsheet of customer accounts. She saw numbers like 10 and 100. And naturally assumed it meant $10,000 or $100,000. But her operations manager looked at her and said, "No, that's a dime and that's a dollar." Customers were literally spinning up an instance, spending 10 cents, and turning it off. Carlson realized right then and there that the only way to actually make money was to become deeply consultative. They had to dive into the customer's mission, solve their real problems, and delight them so much that they'd actually want to keep those servers running.
But being consultative meant keeping up with the tech, right? In her first year, AWS launched 23 new services. By her last year, they were launching around 2,800 new services and features annually. Try training a sales team on that. To keep her account executives fresh and capable of talking to vastly different agencies, we're talking everyone from defense to agriculture to healthcare, she had to build out these massive internal training and certification programs. It was just relentless scaling.
Moving right along to Part 3, Hiring for the Mission.
Carlson quickly learned that the transactional leaders she knew from her old software days just wouldn't survive here. She needed a very specific breed of leader. She was looking for people with high EQ, emotional quotient, who were genuinely curious listeners. But above all else, she looked for a burn in their belly for the specific industry they were serving.
They couldn't just be tech geeks, you know? They had to be deeply passionate about a government agency's overarching mission. They needed to be hungry to solve the real-world problem, not just try to cram a shiny new tech widget into a workflow. And to manage the stress of all this uncharted territory, she leaned heavily on a core Amazon philosophy. We'll do this till we know better. I love this. It's the ultimate hack for moving fast that you can actually apply to your own teams. Make a decision, move forward, and adjust when you learn more. It totally empowered her team to experiment, build out new sales methodologies, and create complex capacity planning models without that paralyzing fear of being locked in forever.
All right, part 4, landing the CIA contract. This all builds to the most pivotal moment in this entire story.
So it's 2012 and the Central Intelligence Agency wants to build a classified cloud environment. AWS decided to bid on it. But get this. Carlson's team bidding on this massive, historically complex contract consisted of exactly 4 people. 4. They were up against absolute colossal giants like IBM and Microsoft, who had huge armies dedicated to the bid. Everyone told AWS there was no way they could win. But they did. AWS won because the CIA recognized that their legacy contracting process was leaving their tech stagnant, and AWS was offering true, continuous commercial innovation. Carlson actually calls winning the CIA contract the shot heard around the world, because before this, commercial enterprises were incredibly skeptical. They kept telling AWS that the cloud just wasn't secure enough for real enterprise data. But the very second AWS built a functional, highly classified environment for the intelligence community, that argument vanished overnight. Commercial CEOs looked at it and essentially said, well, if the CIA can use the cloud, we can definitely use the cloud.
And this highlights a massive lesson on how government policy shapes commercial industry. That framework AWS helped build for the government, FedRAMP, became the absolute gold standard. Because industries like healthcare and finance are so highly regulated, they just looked at what the US government did and seamlessly snapped into the exact same compliance models. Getting it right for the strictest government agencies completely unlocked the commercial sector.
Which tees us up perfectly for part 5, the cloud and AI parallel. How does this history lesson actually apply to the explosive AI boom happening right now?
Carlson is now the CEO of the General Catalyst Institute, where she helps startups navigate policy and government. And her comparison between the cloud boom and the AI boom is super striking. Back when scaling AWS, she used to tell her team to strap in, because they wouldn't ever see anything move that fast again. But looking at AI adoption today, she calls it a double or triple strap in. AI is scaling at a pace completely beyond what even the early lightning-fast cloud revolution saw.
But, and this is a big but, here is the critical warning she's raising. Remember that NIST definition and the FedRAMP security models we talked about? The ones that allowed the cloud to be safely adopted? Yeah, AI doesn't have that yet. Government and commercial entities are buying and adopting AI at breakneck speed without an established AI framework. Carlson points out that this patchwork of regulations is incredibly hard on startups, maybe even yours, and she really worries that we are moving way too fast without those critical safety nets in place.
Because we're missing those frameworks, human behavior is basically repeating itself. Companies are wildly experimenting with AI right now, throwing huge amounts of money at tokens and models, kind of like how they overbought early on-premise software. But based on her cloud experience, Carlson predicts we will inevitably hit what she calls the optimization point.
Just like in the cloud days, when customers eventually pulled back to analyze their true compute usage, AI spend is eventually going to restructure. Companies are going to look at those massive AI bills and ask, wait, are we actually getting real business value here? They'll pivot to optimizing their token usage. They'll double down on the workloads that are truly critical to their success. And they'll start clearing out the experimental tech debt they've racked up over the last couple of years. This blind spending spree is going to mature into calculated optimization.
Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. We literally have the playbook. Teresa Carlson proved that educating the market early, establishing rigorous compliance frameworks, and fiercely focusing on actual customer value over mere software availability literally creates multi-billion-dollar industries. So the question is, will today's AI leaders apply these hard-won lessons from the 2010s cloud boom before they hit a wall? Or are we just destined to learn them all over again the hard way? What do you think? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll catch you next time.